Hey, don't think it's just me talking and you all just listening about Buddhism. Actually, all of you are in communion too. So, what fills, permeates, and occupies this role? It's Buddha-nature. Let me tell you a story about a Zen master and his disciple who couldn't attain enlightenment and couldn't figure out why. You see, when you convert, you take the 3 vows, taking refuge in the Buddha, taking refuge in the Dharma, teachings, and taking refuge in the Sangha, community of practitioners, right? But here's the thing, the Buddha, Shakyamuni, has been gone for a long time. So one day, this disciple asks his master, "Master, can you tell me where the Buddha is?" And you know what the Zen master says? He says, "Right in front of you, the one who is speaking the Dharma is the Buddha." Boom! That statement hits the disciple hard, and he suddenly gets it, attaining enlightenment. The point is, all beings have Buddha nature. Now, let's talk about Buddhism itself. It's not your typical religion, you know why? Because it's atheistic. Buddha nature is not the same as the holy nature mentioned in Western Christianity. Buddha nature is something that every single one of us possesses. The Chinese character Fo is used to translate the Sanskrit word Buddha. And what does Buddha mean? It means an awakened one. Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, was just an ordinary person who became awakened and was called a Buddha. So, you see, Buddhism is all about realizing our own Buddha nature and awakening to our true potential. All beings are Buddhas, some are Buddhas who haven't awakened yet, and Buddhas are beings who have already awakened. So, what's the big deal about Zen Buddhism in Chinese thought? Well, it's the first time in history that the idea of equality among all beings has been recognized. Even Confucius didn't quite get there. He said things like, "Only the wise and the foolish stay focused, and beware of women and lowly people." There were still distinctions. But in Zen Buddhism, everyone is equal. But how can beings be equal when there are so many differences among them? Intelligence levels vary, social backgrounds and statuses differ, and there are even distinctions between men and women. So, how can they be equal? Well, despite all these differences, the Buddha nature within each being is inherently equal. That's why, to truly understand Zen Buddhism, the first thing to grasp is equality. These days, there are a bunch of middle-aged or almost old folks who are really into practicing Buddhism, and many of them are super dedicated. Let me tell you about something that happened to me. I have this buddy from high school who I was really close with, not just classmates but real childhood friends. So, this guy, he hit the jackpot during the reform and opening up period, made a ton of money. He's got this fancy 4-story mansion. One day, I went to visit him because I wanted to talk about organizing a high school reunion. When I got to his place, his servant stopped me and said, "You gotta wait, he's doing his Buddhist practice right now." I knew he was into Buddhism, so I told the servant, "We're old classmates and good friends. I want to go in and see how he does his practice." The servant let me in. Inside this fancy mansion, he's got this special spot with a little Buddhist shrine. I peeked inside through the shrine's window and saw him bowing down to the Buddha. He was doing these full-on prostrations, completely touching the ground, even on a hot day with no air conditioning. I thought to myself, damn, this guy is really committed. He's truly dedicated to his practice. He knew I was there, but he hadn't finished yet. It took him about half an hour to complete. Finally, he stood up and the first thing he said to me was gossip about someone, talking trash about them. I couldn't help but speak up and say, "Dude, you just wasted all that bowing, you might as well have done a workout." His face turned red right away. He asked, "What do you mean by that?" Since we were good friends, I didn't hold back and said whatever was on my mind. I said, "I may not bow like you, I may not be as diligent in my practice, but I understand the meaning of bowing. The Buddha statue you were bowing to, whether it's made of clay, wood, or metal, it's just an idol. The point of bowing isn't about the idol itself, you know? It's about what? When we bow, we're supposed to completely let go of our ego, bowing with our head touching the ground. But you didn't want to touch your head to the ground. It seems like you haven't fully let go of yourself, haven't completely surrendered. The whole point of bowing is to let go of our small self, to remind ourselves every day. But as soon as you stood up, you started talking smack about others. I'm telling you, man, you wasted your bowing. He asked, how do you know? I replied, I've read the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, have you? He said, nah, I haven't. I said, well, read the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch and then keep on bowing. In the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, there's a story about Master Huineng, the sixth patriarch, who had become enlightened and learned the Buddha's teachings. After living alone for 15 years, he started teaching Buddhism at Baolin Temple, now known as Nanhua Temple, and held the Dongshan Dharma Assembly. People from all over came to seek his guidance. Once, a high-ranking government official, a provincial governor, came with a group of people to ask Huineng a question. He said, I know there's a story in the history of Zen Buddhism. The first patriarch, Bodhidharma, 5th century CE, was an Indian who came to China to spread the Dharma. He met Emperor Wu of the Liang dynasty and wanted to enlighten him. They had a conversation, and Emperor Wu asked Bodhidharma, I've built many temples and supported many monks in my life. Can you tell me if my gongda is great? Bodhidharma gave a straightforward answer, that's not called gongda. Emperor Wu didn't understand and felt unhappy, so they didn't connect. They went their separate ways. Emperor Wu didn't bother Bodhidharma, and Bodhidharma gave up on enlightening Emperor Wu. With this story, the official asked Huineng, was Bodhidharma right? Huineng replied, don't doubt it. He explained, what Bodhidharma said is completely correct. Emperor Wu, despite doing many things, can be called Fuda, giving charity, at most, and he'll receive gratitude in return. But it's not called gongda. The official then asked Huineng, what is gongda? Huineng answered with 8 characters, Jian Xing, seeing one's own true nature, is gong, and Ping Deng, respecting everyone around you equally, is da. When combined, it's called gongda. What is seeing one's true nature? It is the self-recognition of one's inherent nature and Buddha nature, which is a state reached by the mind. This inner state of the mind, when expressed outwardly, is how we interact with others, and that is called da. What is the guiding principle here? Equality. Seeing one's nature is gong, so let me summarize here, universal respect is what constitutes gongda. We should respect every person, even if they have committed serious sins that are morally wrong and punishable by law. They may be sentenced and imprisoned, but we should never look down upon them. Why? Because their Buddha nature is still within them. All beings possess Buddha nature. The reason they committed such grave sins and made big mistakes is because they are deluded and haven't realized their true nature. When their deluded thoughts are replaced with awakened thoughts, they can still become Buddhas. There is still hope for them. In Buddhism, no one is without hope. That's why the Chinese people later came up with the saying, put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot. Even someone who has taken lives can still attain enlightenment. When Huineng spoke to the monk, he emphasized, never look down upon beginners. Looking down upon others carries immense negative consequences. This statement raises the importance of this discussion. Why? If we examine the history of human civilization, we'll find that many crimes stem from the act of looking down upon others. Therefore, Buddhist teachings address this fundamental issue. So, let's talk about reading Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. If you were to read this book by itself, you would definitely sense the author's grandiose ideas. He believed that the Germanic people had a special mission to save humanity. He even said, "I'm willing to dedicate my entire life to the Germanic people and lead humanity towards a brighter future." Reading something like that would surely move you, right? But here's the thing, despite all that lofty talk, Hitler ended up committing unimaginable evil. And why? Because he looked down upon others. First, he looked down upon the Jewish people, and later on, he looked down upon the Slavic people too. He implemented brutal policies of racial extermination against the Jewish community, all in the name of his so-called noble ideals. It's clear as day. This is why Buddhism teaches us that looking down upon others is a grave sin. Don't underestimate it. That's why I hesitate to say that I'm studying or practicing Buddhism. Why, you ask? The first step in practicing Buddhism is universal respect, respecting every single person. And let me tell you, it's not easy to do. In our daily interactions, we inevitably come across people who are not only less intelligent but also have terrible behavior. They do all sorts of nasty things, and it's hard not to look down upon them. Thoughts of disdain pop up in our minds, and we know deep down that it's wrong. It's a real struggle, I tell you. Now, it's relatively easy not to look down upon those who are below us in terms of status. Why? Because we might feel superior and even have some compassion for them. But it's much harder not to look down upon those who are above us. Let's say the Prime Minister pays a visit to our university. You can bet that the university leaders would go all out to prepare a grand reception, being extra careful not to make any mistakes. We show enough respect, right? But are we truly respecting them? While receiving the Prime Minister, thoughts like, "You've been in power for so long, and look at the state of the country's economy under your leadership," might cross our minds. It's inevitable. You see, not looking down upon someone who is in a higher position than us is even more challenging. We might think, what makes them better than me? Look at their behavior. It's a never-ending struggle, my friends. Universal respect is indeed difficult to achieve. Huineng talks about practicing at home in the Platform Sutra. Obviously, if everyone joined the order, it would mean the end of society. While becoming a monk is admirable, it would lead to the demise of future generations. Huineng encourages people to practice at home, as every aspect of life can be a place for spiritual growth. So, what does Huineng suggest are the key points of practicing at home? What are the things we must do? There are 4 aspects in total. The first aspect is equality, and it's actually the most challenging one. We should never disrespect anyone. For example, some of you may become doctors in the future. Let me give you an analogy. Someone asks me, "We agree with equality, but it's hard not to disrespect others." I reply, "Yes, it is difficult, but we must strive to achieve it." They ask, "How can we do that?" In the analogy, you were the doctor, you would encounter various patients and conditions, some of which could be very complex and challenging. As a doctor, your responsibility would be to do your best to handle these situations and not show impatience or use offensive language towards the patients. Sometimes, this can be difficult, but as a doctor, your task is to provide help and support to the best of your abilities. Similarly, when we encounter individuals with problems, whether physical, mental, or behavioral, we should not respond in like manner. When we see someone doing something wrong, it's like a doctor seeing a patient. Instead of becoming like them, we should try to help them. That's how things should be. This is just a small part of the wisdom passed down by Huineng. Due to time constraint here, I could only talk about one aspect of practicing at home. We should really read the Platform Sutra from beginning to end. There will be many parts that we don't understand, and it's not because we lack intelligence. It's that in our life experiences, some of us may not have reached that level yet, so we can't fully grasp it. So be patient. This Buddhist scripture, if you really get into it and let it resonate with your own life experiences, then you'll definitely get it. And when you can apply that understanding to your everyday life, that's when you've reached a higher level of living. That's why it's important to make time and opportunities to read works like the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, as well as and the Diamond Sutra in this connection. Nowadays, especially for us Chinese folks, we've got a lot of issues, and our reputation in the international community isn't so great, you know what I mean. Those Westerners might say, "Hey, you Chinese people have loads of money." When they see Chinese tourists in Paris, they're buying up all the fancy luxury stuff. It's embarrassing, right? I've seen it myself. Our international image is in bad shape, which means we've got some serious problems. So, how do we fix them? Well, one way is by studying Buddhism. The three major schools of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism in China. Where does Buddhism fit in? Well, think of it like medicine for curing illnesses. And where does Confucianism fit in? It's like food, the stuff we need to survive. You can't just rely on medicine to live, right? You need to eat grains, and that's where Confucianism comes into play. Why do we associate Confucianism with grains? Because Confucianism, as taught by Confucius, emphasizes the importance of family and the responsibilities we have towards each other. It's the foundation of Confucianism. And what about Taoism? When it comes to eating grains, humans are different from animals. Animals just eat to fill their bellies, but we humans not only eat grains, we also savor the taste. It's like the art of cooking, turning food into gourmet delights. Taoism represents art. It gives us a mindset that appreciates and approaches the world with an aesthetic and artistic attitude. It's about finding harmony with the world instead of fighting against it. That's what art is all about. So, in simple terms, the relationship between these three schools is as follows. Confucianism grounds us in reality, Taoism frees us to appreciate the beauty of the world, and Buddhism helps us heal our deepest wounds. In Buddhism, the ultimate goal is to attain liberation from the suffering of birth and death. Once we achieve this liberation, are there any other problems that cannot be resolved? Will illnesses naturally not disappear? This is why Zen Buddhism takes this goal to the highest level. It emphasizes that practice is not separate from life, and life is not separate from practice. There is no need for any additional external pursuits. If someone excels in other areas of life but their inner state remains unchanged, then it cannot be considered as truly practicing Buddhism. I believe you all understand this point. That's why I always encourage my classmate, mentioned earlier, to work hard at it, because it will bring benefits. This is also accumulating good karma, which is said to be true, and now I am starting to believe it. The effects of past karma persists and can influence our present circumstances. Now, let's talk about some superstitious beliefs. We have a personal history that extends beyond this current lifetime. We have experienced past lives, and we carry the karmic forces from those past lives into the present one. Some people have stronger karmic forces, while others have weaker ones. Was Mao Zedong influenced by strong karmic forces? Yes. The fate of an entire nation rested on him, and the magnitude of his karma was immense. That's why he had to accomplish such great things in order to alleviate it, you know? It's important to recognize that not everyone has the same level of karmic qualification. So, instead of lamenting that you are not a great person, it's better to be content that your karmic burden is not as heavy. This understanding is at the core of Buddhist philosophy. You know, back in 1978, the college entrance exam was brought back, and I thought, why not give it a shot? My dad was thrilled and encouraged me to apply. Even though I was working as a factory worker in Shanghai, at the time it was considered a decent job, you know what I mean? So, I thought, why not go to college and change my situation? A lot of people had the same idea at that time. I told my dad, I want to go to college. So, I filled out my college application, and guess what? I put down the philosophy department at Fudan University as my first choice. My dad was like, why on earth do you want to study philosophy? It's so abstract. People used to say that studying subjects like math, physics, or chemistry would open up all sorts of opportunities. But I was different. I said, I love abstract stuff, the more abstract, the better. I'm afraid it won't be abstract enough. My dad couldn't wrap his head around it. Later on, I started thinking about it myself and found it pretty weird. How did this desire to study philosophy come to me? It wasn't like I only knew about philosophy, right? I also studied physics and math, and I enjoyed solving problems and finding proofs. So, why did I still choose philosophy? And why such an abstract subject? After pondering over it, I realized there must be a reason behind it. Things like this don't just happen out of the blue. Our desires aren't always the result of our choices. When a desire pops up in our hearts, and we decide to pursue it, we do have the freedom to choose how to go about it. But when it comes to the desire itself, we don't really know where it comes from, you know what I'm saying? In that sense, we don't have complete freedom. It shows that we all have some sort of origin. Imagine if you met Mao Zedong's parents, for example. Let's just imagine, okay? And you ask them, did you give birth to Mao Zedong? At first, they might want to say, yes, but then they would hesitate. Biologically speaking, Mao Zedong was indeed their child, and they even called him Shirsan Yazi, 13th boy, as a nickname. But can they really claim that they gave birth to him when an entire era is named after him? It's clear that we all have origins, and it's something that can't be scientifically proven. You can't provide evidence, but you can understand it, right? What philosophy and religion talk about is beyond science, but it doesn't mean that it lacks a basis just because it goes beyond science. It's just that this basis cannot be discussed using scientific methods. That's why we can't afford not to have a bit of philosophical cultivation and a bit of religious sentiment. A person should have a bit of religious sentiment, even if they are not a true believer. Because if we have religious sentiment, we will definitely humble ourselves and not be arrogant. The biggest flaw of humanity at present is that with the rationality of science, we think we are ready to conquer everything, becoming arrogant and forgetting the fundamental limitations and insignificance of human existence. We must always remember that our existence is fundamentally limited and insignificant. In the face of this mortal existence, we are humble. If we always remember this, then we will have the necessary humility. Humility is the premise of faith. The most terrifying person is someone who, relying on their knowledge and rational power, is arrogant and believes they can conquer everything. The humility we speak of is the recognition of our fundamental limitations and the acceptance of the existential void. It is through facing the void that we come to comprehend this, and only then can we cultivate a humble attitude. Here, humility is not described as a virtue of modesty or humility in the conventional sense. It is also about understanding that as human beings, we are both finite and infinite. Our knowledge can keep growing, but our existence is ultimately limited and insignificant. That's why Judaism talks about original sin, which comes from the mistake of thinking we can conquer everything infinitely by eating the fruit of wisdom. This idea of original sin is also found in other religions, like Buddhism. Both Gautama Buddha and the prophets of Judaism understood the concept of the existential void when exploring the depths of their wisdom. So, when we talk about wisdom, especially in Zen Buddhism, it's about first accommodating the idea of the existential void and then returning to our everyday lives. We need to transcend the world before we can truly engage with it. This kind of wisdom is indescribable, so Zen Buddhism translated as prajna using the original Indian sound. We still chant it like that today. Prajna Paramitha means great wisdom that leads to liberation from the cycle of life and death, which is the ultimate goal. Alright, I'll end the lecture here due to time constraints. Thank you, everyone.